The entire first-class cabin went silent. A billionaire's son, just 5 years old and completely deaf, had been crying nonstop for nearly an hour. No toy could calm him, no word could reach him, and his powerful father sat helpless, his heart breaking with every tear. Then out of nowhere, a little girl from the back of the plane walked up, holding a teddy bear. She didn't say a single word. Instead, she raised her hands and began to sign. Within seconds, the boy's crying stopped, and what happened next left every passenger, including the billionaire, in tears. The sound of a child's cry echoed through the luxurious private jet, cutting through the hum of the engines like a knife. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing over their shoulders. Flight attendants whispered among themselves, unsure what to do. At the center of it all sat Richard Morgan, one of the world's most powerful billionaires, a man whose name commanded respect in boardrooms and headlines alike. Yet now, at 30,000 feet, his face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. He wasn't battling a hostile merger or a political scandal. He was facing something far worse to him: his 5-year-old son's uncontrollable sobs. "Ethan, buddy, please," Richard said softly, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're almost there. It's okay." But Ethan couldn't hear him. The little boy, born deaf, was terrified. His small fingers clutched the armrest tightly as the plane hit another pocket of turbulence. The lights flickered, and he began to cry harder, shaking his head and covering his ears as if to block out the vibrations he could feel, but not understand. Richard reached for him, his expensive watch glinting in the cabin light. "It's okay, son. It's okay." But Ethan couldn't read his lips fast enough. The confusion and fear only made his panic worse. A woman nearby sighed audibly. A businessman muttered, "Can't they control that kid?" Richard shot him a cold glare, but guilt immediately followed. He wasn't angry at them. He was angry at himself. Despite all his wealth, his private jets, his nannies and doctors, he still couldn't comfort his own child. The flight attendant appeared with a box of toys, kneeling beside Ethan. "Would you like this, sweetheart?" she said kindly. The boy just turned away, tears still streaming. Richard leaned back, running a hand through his hair. For a man used to solving billion-dollar problems, this moment made him feel powerless. Money can buy silence, he thought bitterly, but it can't stop your child from crying. Then, through the quiet sobs and murmurs, a small, confident voice broke the tension. "Excuse me." "Sir," said a little girl, no older than 7, holding a tiny teddy bear. Her curious eyes looked up at him. Richard blinked, surprised. Yes?" The girl smiled softly, and then she raised her hands and began to sign. As the little girl stood in the aisle, clutching her teddy bear, every eye in the cabin turned toward her. She was small, maybe 7 or 8, wearing a pink hoodie with a unicorn on it. Her brown hair was tied in a messy ponytail, but her eyes, bright and gentle, carried a strange kind of confidence. Without a word, she began to move her hands. Her fingers danced in the air with calm, practiced rhythm. At first, Richard didn't understand what she was doing, but when he looked down at his son, he saw something miraculous. Ethan had stopped crying. His small body, which had been shaking moments earlier, suddenly went still. His eyes widened, following every motion of the girl's hands as if watching a language from a dream he somehow remembered. Her fingers shaped words only Ethan could truly understand. "Hi, my name is Lila. Don't be scared. The plane is safe." Ethan blinked, his breathing slowing. His lips moved silently, and he raised his trembling hands to reply, unsure, hesitant, but desperate to respond. "My ears hurt. It's loud. I'm scared." Lila smiled brightly, then slowly signed back. "It's okay. Look, clouds. We're flying through the sky. You're safe." Her teddy bear flew through the air, as she pretended it was soaring among clouds. Ethan's eyes followed it, curiosity replacing fear. The flight attendants paused mid-step, amazed. The same people who'd sighed in frustration moments ago now stood frozen, their hearts softening. One man whispered, "She's using sign language." Within minutes, the crying boy who had seemed unreachable was giggling quietly, mirroring the girl's hand gestures. Lila taught him how to sign friend, cloud, and safe. She even made him laugh by pretending to sign that her teddy bear was the plane's pilot. The once tense cabin now felt warm and peaceful. Even the hum of the engines seemed softer. Passengers exchanged smiles. Some even pulled out their phones discreetly to capture the beautiful moment, a child calming another, not with words, but with understanding. Richard's throat tightened as he watched the two children. His powerful mind, used to numbers and deals, couldn't process what he was witnessing. All he knew was that, in that moment, his son had stopped crying not because of wealth, medicine, or comfort, but because someone spoke to him in the only language he truly understood. For a long moment, Richard couldn't move. He just sat there, staring at his son. The same boy who had been sobbing uncontrollably minutes ago, now smiling, laughing, and signing back to a little girl he'd never met. It felt surreal. The tension that had filled the cabin vanished, replaced by something gentle and pure. Richard's throat tightened as he watched Ethan and Lila communicate in silence. It wasn't noisy laughter or loud words. It was peaceful, full of emotion that didn't need sound to be felt. He leaned closer to the little girl's mother, who had been watching nervously from a few seats back. "Your daughter, she knows sign language?" he asked softly. The woman nodded, relief and pride lighting up her face. "Yes, her cousin was born deaf. Lila started learning sign language when she was 4. She's always wanted to help people like him." Richard turned back to the children. 4 years old? He felt a lump rise in his throat. He'd hired the best tutors, the most advanced doctors, and spent money most people couldn't even imagine. But somehow, this little girl had done in minutes what years of therapy and luxury had failed to do. She'd reached his son's heart. He whispered, more to himself than anyone, "She just did what all my money couldn't." The mother smiled softly. Sometimes, all a child needs is someone who listens, even if it's in silence. Richard looked at his son again, really looked at him. He saw the innocence in his smile, the sparkle in his eyes, the life he'd been too busy to notice. He realized how often he'd been absent, caught in meetings, deals, and endless business calls while Ethan sat at home with teachers and nannies. For years, he'd thought giving his son the best of everything meant love. But now he understood love wasn't about money. It was about connection. Lila turned to Richard and began to sign something directly to him. Her mother translated softly, "She says, your son doesn't need more gifts. He just needs someone to talk to." Those words hit him harder than any business failure ever could. For the first time in years, Richard Morgan, the billionaire who thought he had everything, felt tears roll down his cheeks. After that life-changing moment, the entire cabin seemed to breathe differently. The tension, the judgmental stares, the soft whispers, all disappeared. Instead, there was peace, a rare, pure calm that made even the loudest hearts go quiet. Lila gently placed her teddy bear on Ethan's lap and signed, "This is Captain Bear. He's not scared of flying." Ethan giggled, nodding quickly. He hugged the bear tightly, his small fingers tracing its soft fur. Then he looked at Lila and signed back, "Captain Bear is brave." The two children laughed silently, their little hands flying through the air like wings. Richard watched, unable to tear his eyes away. He leaned back in his seat, his expensive suit wrinkled, his heart full. For once, he didn't care about the missed meeting or the headlines waiting for him. All that mattered was this small miracle unfolding in front of him. For the rest of the flight, Lila sat beside Ethan. They played games using hand signs, pretending to draw shapes in the air, and guess what they were? She taught him the signs for sun, bird, thank you, and friend. Ethan learned fast, his laughter growing louder in spirit, even if not in sound. Flight attendants passed by, smiling softly, offering snacks they didn't need anymore. The two were too busy in their own silent world. One of the passengers whispered, "This little girl should be a teacher." Another quietly wiped tears from her eyes. Richard took out his phone, recording the precious moment, not to show the world, but to remind himself of it forever. He wanted to remember the look in his son's eyes, joy, safety, and belonging. As the plane began to descend, the captain announced the landing. The engines hummed gently, but Ethan didn't flinch this time. He sat calmly beside Lila, holding her teddy bear and smiling out the window at the clouds. When the wheels touched the ground, Richard finally spoke, his voice trembling with emotion. "Lila," he said softly, "you've given my son something I never could." "Peace." Lila smiled shyly and signed. He already had peace. He just needed someone to listen. And in that moment, even the billionaire couldn't hold back his tears. When the plane finally landed, the passengers began to clap softly, not for the landing itself, but for the little miracle they had just witnessed in the sky. Lila's mother came forward, gently taking her daughter's hand, whispering, "Sweetheart, time to go." Ethan looked up at Lila, his eyes full of sadness, as if he already knew she was leaving. He quickly signed, "Thank you, friend." Lila smiled, her eyes glistening. She signed back, "You're brave. Don't be scared again." Richard knelt beside them both, his expensive shoes pressed against the airplane floor, tears welling up in his eyes. "Lila," he said softly, "you've done something no one else could. You helped my son speak without a single word." Lila giggled shyly, then handed Ethan her teddy bear. "Captain Bear should stay with him," she said. "He'll help when Ethan feels scared." That simple gesture broke Richard completely. He took her tiny hand in both of his and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart. You may never understand what you've given me." Her mother smiled humbly. "Sometimes the smallest hearts make the biggest difference," she said. As Lila and her mother walked away down the terminal, Richard lifted Ethan into his arms. For the first time, he didn't feel the weight of being a billionaire. He felt like a father, one who had just been given a second chance. That night, back in his mansion, Richard sat with Ethan in his lap, scrolling through videos of sign language lessons. The glowing screen reflected in their eyes as they practiced their first words together. Ethan signed Dad, clumsily but proudly. Richard felt his throat tighten as he signed back, "Son." The next morning, headlines around the world read, "Billionaire's deaf son comforted by little girl using sign language. Flight turns into life lesson." But for Richard, this wasn't about headlines. It was about heart. He soon launched a foundation called Hands of Hope, dedicated to teaching sign language in schools and funding programs for children with hearing disabilities. In every interview, he said the same thing. "That little girl taught me that love doesn't need sound. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words." And from that day on, every evening, no matter how busy life became, Richard sat with Ethan signing, laughing, and loving in a language that money could never buy.